Now I like the dark blue awning of this old drugstore and the view past it to the street and some of the awnings here. I'm using a homemade site-size grid. This is an acrylic sheet with squares drawn in permanent marker on one side. I clip that above the easel and look through it to draw the main lines of the scene in a light blue water-based marker. And then I transfer the grid using that template onto my sketchbook page. This gives me the basic foundational lines, and I explain this whole system more on my downloadable videos Gouache in the Wild and Fantasy in the Wild. So here's the scene I'm looking at, and here's the final painting, just to give you an idea of where I'm heading. I'm not going to do a super detailed line drawing, just want to get the basic foundation because I can draw it in the paint, and the paint that I want to use is this hybrid watercolor and gouache by Pass Design. This set was sent to me by the manufacturer. I didn't ask for it, but I wanted to try it out and see how it worked. Now I want to use these three colors, indigo and yellow ochre and vermilion hue. The vermilion hue is present in that awning over there, and then that indigo kind of is a main color in that sign. And since they're basically a red, yellow, and blue, I should be able to mix almost all the other colors as long as they're not too strong. I'm also experimenting with a homemade palette that's designed to keep water media wet longer by using a water-saturated palette surface. That insert is made of a red plastic stiffener, microfiber cloth, and baker's parchment paper. There are really two different ways of painting with water-based media, transparently and opaquely. If you were working transparently, you'd paint around the light areas and work slowly from light to dark. But with opaque media, or if you're using this material more like gouache, you can lay down a bright background color like I'm doing with yellow ochre and vermilion and some indigo, just to get rid of the white of the paper, because I can always come back to the white later with gouache. These paints are called hybrids only because they can be used either way. They're basically gum arabic as a binder and a very pigment-rich, saturated color. But that's really true of almost all gouache nowadays. The idea is that you can use any of the pigments more or less opaquely, depending on whether you use them straight from the tube or with more white mixtures. I notice the paint is dripping down the palette, and that's not the fault of the paint. It's because I'm keeping the palette so wet and at such a steep angle. Now here I'm working fairly loosely, painting across all kinds of window dividers and door frames, because I can very easily paint those in later. The secret to gouache is to paint across edges and not to fill it in like a coloring book. Here I'm painting in the cast shadow of the building on the sidewalk. This light will change throughout the session. It's starting to change already, and I may not have this whole front face of the building in shadow for much longer. I want to get in that red umbrella. That's why I chose vermilion as the accent color, the brightest color of the set of three that I chose. Choosing just 3 colors plus white out of a giant set like this with 48 colors is a good way to limit your variables and to explore different combinations of colors. I'm painting the letters subtractively, meaning I'm painting kind of around the shapes of the letters. And if I get the shape a little bit wrong, I can fix that later with opaques. The sidewalk goes in, it's a warm white. And you see that bright red over on the right-hand side. I just threw that in for fun. and as I cover it over with opaques, it'll still peek through in places. If I need a straight line, I can use any kind of straight edge to help guide my brush. The street is fully lit, but it's a little cooler than the sidewalk and a little darker. I spend a lot of time on the shop window, painting all the layers, all the stuff inside this drugstore, the reflections in the window, and then the frame of the window itself. But now I can work on the right-hand side, the parked cars, the buildings across the street, and the weeds growing out of the sidewalk. It just happens that this drugstore will be closing down and they're selling off the rest of their inventory. I don't have a final verdict on this paint set because I really want to try a lot of other color combinations, but for those of you who want to explore this, I'd recommend this set for people who are working in sketchbooks or for designers in film or animation who are doing color scripts. There's a lot of interesting colors, but they're not all light fast. They're all non-toxic, and they vary in transparency and opacity. The links in the description will give you a link to my blog post, which talks more about these paints and where to find them, and also more about my other videos, which go into detail about different painting techniques for either transparent or opaque water media or combinations of the two. While you're here, please subscribe. I have regular videos coming, and if you're subscribed, you get to see them as they first come along. Thanks for watching.